Alright, so here's the engine rebuild video. It's going to be extremely difficult to record it when the engine is in the hull, so I'm going to explain it and then I'll just show brief clips of me actually doing the install. Basically the process you want to follow with the company I went with, which is LeBaron Power Sports in Almont, Michigan. They actually labeled the cylinders and custom fit the cylinders for each piston. So there was that number was the diameter, the 65.36 was the diameter of the cylinder, and the diameter of the piston will be a couple tenths under that. There's your piston rings, your clips, which hold the wrist pin bearing in, or the wrist pin in, and then there's your wrist pin bearing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this clip in one side of the piston. This is going to be the side that points towards the front that I'm going to put in first, just to make it easier to slide the wrist pin in. The arrow points towards the exhaust, so it's to show the direction of the airflow. So I'm going to put the one clip in, slide the piston over the control arm, or the connecting rod, put the wrist pin through with the bearing inside the connecting rod. So bearing in the connecting rod, piston on top of the connecting rod with the clip in the side, put the wrist pin through, and then put the other clip in the other side. These can go flying if you don't have good control over them when you install them, so make sure that you have one finger on them to keep them from bouncing out, because it's spring steel. Then make sure that I've always put them numbers up if there's any labeling on it. The piston rings go onto the piston, and then there's going to be two mounting pins. There's one right there and right there, and those are what the ring collapses down onto. So the ring gap was already set. The rings and the wrist pin and the clips and the piston all came in a kit together, and it's all custom fitted already. So that's one of the advantages of going with a high quality shop, is they really want to put some care into it. So I'm going to get started on this, and I'll shoot a couple videos on the way. So after all that's installed, then you're going to move on to installing the cylinder onto the piston. You need to clamp down with your fingers, hold those shut, hold the piston ring shut, and then you're going to slide the cylinder over the piston. Be very careful. Also make sure the inside of the cylinder is clean. Some shops won't clean it. They'll just bore it out and send it back to you, and you're going to destroy your engine if there's metal shavings in there. So clean that out, and then if you want to, you can coat with very light two-stroke oil. Just coat the inside of the cylinder and the outside of the piston, and you can put a little bit on the wrist pin bearing as well. That won't hurt anything. So after you get that slid on there, slide it all the way down. Make sure your gasket's in place. Make sure both surfaces are clean. That's your cylinder gasket, and then you're going to torque them down one corner, opposite corner, then the next corner, then the opposite corner. And the torque spec for the cylinder is going to be 28 foot-pounds. After that's done, then you're going to put on the head gasket, which goes over the whole thing, and then put on your head, goes over that, and then you're going to do a lug nut pattern, which is like a star pattern for that, so like this. And those, the torque spec for that is 18 foot-pounds. After you get that all together, you're good to put the spark plug back on and finish assembling the intake side of things and the exhaust. So all those pistons and cylinders and heads are all installed now, and I actually got the exhaust header installed as well. You have to put the expansion chamber in, but don't connect it to anything. Make sure all your nuts and bolts and everything are in place, but don't tighten it down. There's the mounting bracket right down there, and then there's the mounting bracket that goes on the front of the motor. So attach those, but don't tighten them down, because you need to be able to manipulate the expansion chamber in order to get the bolts lined up to attach the header. So these front three that hold on the header for the first cylinder were the most difficult to get on. What I ended up doing was getting the front one on, and then get the very back one on here, so that this sits level. And once it sits level, all of those other bolt holes will line up. So that made it a lot easier. So don't forget your gasket. You have 3 separate gaskets that go on each cylinder, between the cylinder and the header, and then 3 bolts for each part of the header. So you have 9 bolts total holding that on. It can be very difficult. If you drop a bolt down, you have to take it all back out usually to get to that bolt, unless you have a magnet or grabbing tool or something. If it slides underneath the engine, then you're going to have to take that out to get to it. So make sure you don't drop the bolts down inside the hull. And you have those 9 bolts and 3 gaskets, and install those. Next, I'm going to install the expansion chamber gasket, which goes right there. And then it's 4 rather large bolts to hold that on. The 2 short ones go here, and then the 2 long ones go there. So that's what I'm going to install next.